On Christmas morning, my parents beamed and gave my sister a key. Then they said, "We purchased her a home, you'll understand one day." I didn't protest. I just kept quiet. But when my dad unwrapped the present I gave him, his grin vanished instantly. Have you ever felt truly invisible in your own family? Like your successes were just expected, while someone else's struggles were celebrated? Well, imagine that quiet ache, that simmering injustice, exploding on Christmas morning. Not with a shout, but with the quiet click of a key. A key that didn't just unlock a door, but ripped open years of hidden secrets, betrayal, and a truth so shocking, it changed everything. That Christmas Eve, our house, usually bursting with the comforting scent of pine and my mom, Eleanor's, legendary cinnamon rolls, felt off. Heavy. You know, that perfect, picturesque snow falling outside, creating a scene straight out of a postcard. It was beautiful, sure, but inside, a knot of tension was tightening in my chest. It was like the perfect facade was just barely holding back something immense. Our traditional Douglas fir, twinkling with all our familiar ornaments, each one a memory, usually brought me such comfort. But this year, every cherished detail felt fragile. Like it could shatter at any moment. I'm Chloe. 29, a financial analyst. My life? Built on logic, stability, and maybe a little too much common sense. Then there's my sister, Sophie. 2 years younger, the vibrant, artistic free spirit. The one our parents, David and Eleanor, always seemed to really see. Growing up in suburban Boston, Sophie, with her flowing auburn hair and paint-stained fingers, was always the celebrated artist. Even now, pushing into her 30s and still struggling, my parents never stopped praising her creative spirit, defending every choice, no matter how financially precarious. And then there was me. I excelled academically. Earned a scholarship. Built a successful career. By 29, I owned a comfortable apartment with a harbor view, a robust investment portfolio, everything they preached, but never truly valued when I achieved it. Numbers are safe, Chloe, my dad, David, would say, subtly diminishing my accomplishments. But Sophie, she's really putting herself out there with her art. What did putting herself out there actually mean for Sophie? It meant David and Eleanor covering her rent. Paying off credit cards. Financing art supplies for projects that, let's be honest, rarely materialized. Me? I'd been financially independent since college, never asking for a dime. Our family gatherings had become a predictable performance. Sophie would arrive late, usually with a new crisis, a gallery falling through, a boyfriend who just didn't understand her vision. David and Eleanor would immediately rally around her, offering money, solutions, endless emotional support. And I'd sit quietly, sipping my wine, wondering if I was even in the room. Thanksgiving, just weeks before, had been a stark reminder. I'd just closed a major account, secured my job during company-wide layoffs, and earned a substantial bonus. When I tried to share, Eleanor cut me off. "Honey, that's great," she'd said, "but Sophie is going through something serious right now. Her landlord raised the rent again, and we need to figure out how to help her." Later, I overheard David promising Sophie they'd figure something out for her housing, insisting they always take care of family. It hurt. Why did their definition of family so often seem to exclude me? Despite the dynamic, I genuinely loved my parents and Sophie. I knew Sophie battled anxiety and self-doubt beneath that bohemian exterior, and I understood our parents felt they needed to protect her. I had learned to find validation in my own accomplishments, not their approval. Still, a stubborn part of me clung to the hope that they would someday truly see me. Acknowledge what I'd built. That's why, after agonizing deliberation, I decided to come home for Christmas. I'd spent months planning the perfect gift for David. Something that required significant sacrifice, even with my comfortable salary. Something that would finally make him understand that my financial mind wasn't cold, but a different kind of creativity. One that could protect what mattered most. The secret started in October. While helping Eleanor find old photo albums in the attic, I'd stumbled upon it. A stack of foreclosure notices. Addressed to David. His contracting business, the one he never mentioned, was drowning. The family home, the house Sophie and I grew up in, was 3 months from being lost. Instead of confronting him, I acted. Using a significant portion of my savings, liquidating investments, even taking a small loan against my 401k. I paid off the entire remaining mortgage. It was done. The deed was transferred. The house secured. I imagined David's face when he realized what I'd done. My pragmatic daughter, saving the family home, unasked, unrecognized. Maybe then he'd see. I packed my bags for the drive, a strange cocktail of anxiety and hope churning inside me. This Christmas, I told myself, things would change. As I pulled into the driveway, Sophie's battered Volkswagen was already parked haphazardly. Of course. She always managed to arrive before me, despite living further away. Eleanor enveloped me in a hug that smelled of cinnamon and pine. "Chloe, we were wondering when you'd get here." Sophie emerged from the kitchen, a glass of mulled wine in hand, her hair a vibrant red. "The corporate world finally released you," she teased. I forced a smile. I had news, too. A potential promotion to senior analyst. But I knew it would, once again, take a back seat. Dinner was stilted. David seemed distracted, picking at his food. Eleanor filled the silence with questions about Sophie's art. My brief, technical answers about work glazed their eyes over. Several times, I saw my parents exchange meaningful glances. Twice, I caught them whispering to Sophie when they thought I wasn't looking. A familiar cold dread settled in my stomach. The sense of being an outsider in my own family. Later, gathered for our traditional Christmas Eve hot chocolate, the whispers grew bolder. "Should we tell her now?" I heard Eleanor murmur to David when I returned from the bathroom. "Tomorrow, with everything else," David replied, his voice tight. Sophie caught my eye, a flash of guilt crossing her face before she quickly changed the subject. My mind raced. What were they planning? Did they know about the foreclosure? About what I'd done? That night, in my childhood bedroom, I lay awake, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling. The house creaked, familiar sounds. That now felt like whispers of secrets. I wasn't jealous of Sophie, not exactly. What hurt was the feeling that my parents valued her struggles more than my successes, as though choosing a stable path made me less interesting, less worthy of their enthusiasm. Morning arrived with the soft gray light of a snowy New England Christmas. For a moment, I felt the simple excitement of childhood. Then reality crashed back. Foreclosure notices, whispers, exclusion. I dressed in a festive red sweater, armor for whatever the day would bring. Downstairs, the nervous energy was palpable. David kept checking his watch. Sophie couldn't stop smiling. Eleanor dropped a spoon twice. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked. "Of course," Eleanor said, too brightly. "Just excited for Christmas." Sophie let out a small, suppressed giggle. The Christmas tree twinkled over a modest pile of presents. My eyes went to the small, elegantly wrapped box containing the mortgage papers. Would it change things? Would it finally prove my practical nature could also be generous and loving? As we settled into our usual spots, I noticed a tiny, silver-wrapped box, not there the night before, propped prominently against the tree. It had Sophie's name on it in David's distinctive handwriting. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Whatever was happening, I definitely wasn't part of it. "Well," David said, clearing his throat, "I think we should start with that one." Eleanor reached for her phone. Let me get a video of this. Sophie looked at me, a strange mix of excitement and guilt on her face. You're going to be so surprised, she said. I forced a smile, gripping my coffee mug tighter. Can't wait. The room felt suddenly smaller. Outside, the snow continued to fall, creating a stark contrast to the tension building inside me. Open it slowly, Eleanor urged, her phone raised. Sophie, never one for patience, tore into the wrapping. Inside was a small velvet box, the kind for jewelry. My first thought was Eleanor's heirloom sapphire pendant. A flash of hurt, but I pushed it down. A necklace was just an object. But when Sophie opened the box, it wasn't jewelry. It was a key. New. Shiny brass. Attached to a small house-shaped keychain. Sophie's eyes widened. Is this what I think it is? Her voice was barely a whisper. David leaned forward, a wide smile. The little bungalow on Maple Street, he beamed. The yellow one you always admired. It's yours, sweetheart. Eleanor was crying now. Happy tears. We closed last week. It's all finished and ready for you to move in. The room seemed to tilt. The yellow bungalow. A charming two-bedroom in a desirable neighborhood. I'd admired it myself, noting the nearly $400,000 listing price. A sum I knew my parents couldn't afford, given the foreclosure notices gathering dust upstairs. Sophie launched herself at them, a tearful hug. I can't believe you did this. How did you even afford it? Don't worry about that, David said, thick with emotion. We've been planning and saving for this for a long time. You deserve a fresh start, a place of your own. I sat frozen, coffee now cold in my mug. My sister was being gifted an entire house while our family home faced foreclosure. A house that cost hundreds of thousands when they couldn't even pay their own mortgage. It made no sense. Wow, I finally managed. My voice distant. That is quite a gift. 3 faces turned to me, as if suddenly remembering I was there. Sophie's expression held a flash of guilt, then excitement again. Eleanor looked uncomfortable. David's expression was unreadable. It's a big step, I continued carefully. How did you manage to buy a house right now? I thought things were tight with the business. It was the closest I'd come to acknowledging the financial troubles. A shadow crossed David's face. Financial matters are complicated, Chloe. There are aspects of our planning you're not aware of. Sophie has struggled so much with housing stability, Eleanor added quickly. You have your wonderful apartment and secure job. Sophie needs this foundation to build her future. You'll understand someday, David said. The dismissive phrase hitting me like a physical blow. When you have children of your own, you'll understand that sometimes you have to make decisions based on who needs the help most. The implication was clear. Sophie needed help. I didn't. Sophie deserved extraordinary generosity. I didn't. I thought about the foreclosure notices upstairs. The considerable sum I'd spent saving our family home. Money that could have been a down payment on my own place. Years of swallowing hurt while my achievements were met with nods, and Sophie's smallest efforts were celebrated. Right, I said quietly. Sophie was already talking excitedly about paint colors, where she'd set up her easel. Eleanor suggested furniture. David explained the prepaid property taxes. I sat silently, invisible once again, watching them celebrate. The weight of the mortgage papers, my own gift to David, felt like a stone in my stomach. What would happen when he opened it? How long have you been planning this? I couldn't help but ask. Eleanor and David exchanged a glance. We started looking at options about 6 months ago, Eleanor said, when Sophie's landlord first mentioned he might sell her building. 6 months ago. right around the time the foreclosure notices started arriving. "Well, it's an incredibly generous gift," I said. "Your gift is coming too, Chloe," Eleanor said, misinterpreting my comment. "We have a lovely set of professional cookware for your apartment." Cookware. Sophie got a house and I got cookware. The disparity was so absurd, I almost laughed. "Thank you," I said automatically. "That will be very useful." "It says Adam's family home on it," Sophie said, squinting at the key. "Because it's yours, but also part of our family legacy now," David explained. Family legacy. The phrase echoed in my mind as I glanced at the wrapped box containing the deed to the actual family home. The one that would have been lost without my intervention. The one they had apparently decided was less important than buying Sophie a house of her own. "Should we continue with the other presents?" I suggested, my voice strained. As the morning continued, I went through the motions, admiring the cookware, thanking them for the scarf and earrings. I watched Sophie receive art supplies and home essentials for her new house. My own carefully chosen gifts were passed out. A first edition of Eleanor's favorite novel. A handcrafted watch for David. Professional-grade pastels for Sophie. All the while, David's gift from me sat under the tree, the last present. The longer it sat, the more I questioned whether I should invent an excuse to take it back. But something, pride, hurt, or perhaps just the desire for truth, wouldn't let me. So I waited, making small talk, sipping fresh coffee, for the moment everything would change. Finally, only one present remained. My gift to David. It sat alone, the gold wrapping. Catching the lights. "Looks like we saved the best for last," Eleanor said. "That one is for you, David," from Chloe. David, who'd been helping Sophie research paint swatches, looked up with mild surprise. "Oh, I thought we were finished." His tone was light, joking. Must be something special from my successful daughter. But there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Nervousness, perhaps. Did he suspect? "It's nothing, really," I said automatically. The instinct to downplay my contributions, deeply ingrained. Now, David said, reaching for the present. "Don't sell yourself short. Your gifts are always thoughtful." He took his time untying the bow, carefully preserving the wrapping paper, a habit from his childhood during leaner times. His methodical unwrapping, normally endearing, now stretched my nerves to breaking point. I held my breath. Finally, he lifted the lid. His expression changed instantly. Confusion replaced polite anticipation. He moved aside the tissue paper, revealing the legal documents inside. The mortgage satisfaction letter on top, followed by the deed to the house, now free and clear. David's smile vanished. He froze, his hands still, staring at the papers. "What is it?" Eleanor asked, leaning forward. "Chloe, what did you give him?" Sophie looked up from her phone, finally diverted. I swallowed hard. "It's the mortgage to this house," I said quietly. "Paid in full." The room went completely silent. Even the Christmas music seemed to fade. David's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the satisfaction letter. "How did you?" His voice trailed off. "I found the foreclosure notices in October," I explained, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "When I was helping Eleanor look for photo albums in the attic. The house was 3 months away from being taken by the bank." Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Foreclosure, David? What is she talking about?" David's face had drained of color. He looked older, the lines around his eyes more pronounced. "Eleanor, I was going to tell you. I was trying to handle it by buying Sophie a house when you couldn't pay for this one." The words escaped before I could stop them, sharper than I intended. Sophie's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "What? David, is this true?" Were you losing the family home? David placed the papers carefully on the coffee table, his movements deliberate, buying time. The business has been struggling for years, he finally admitted. The pandemic, supply chain issues, rising costs. I've been using our retirement savings to keep it afloat, but it wasn't enough. The mortgage fell behind. And you didn't tell me? Eleanor's voice was barely audible, hurt and betrayal evident. I didn't want to worry you, David replied. I thought I could figure it out. By buying me a house. Sophie asked incredulously. How does that make any sense? David looked at her, then at me, then down at his hands. The bungalow was significantly less expensive than what we owed on this mortgage. The plan was to sell this house before the foreclosure became final, pay off what we could, and use the bungalow as our fresh start. Sophie would let us live with her until we got back on our feet. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. So, the house was never really for Sophie, I said. It was for all of you. An escape plan. Sophie sank back against the sofa, her earlier excitement completely evaporated. You weren't giving me a house. You were making me your safety net. It wasn't like that, Eleanor protested, though her voice lacked conviction. We were helping you while also helping ourselves. We would have told you the complete situation once we were settled. But now it doesn't matter, David said, looking back at the mortgage documents, because somehow, Chloe has paid off the entire mortgage. He looked up at me, his expression a mix of shame, relief, and astonishment. How? This was over $200,000, still outstanding. I liquidated some investments, I said simply. Used most of my savings. Took a small loan against my 401k that I'll repay over time. You sacrificed your own financial security, David stated, not a question, but a realization. Yes. Why didn't you just tell us you knew? He asked, a defensive edge in his voice. Why go behind our backs? I met his gaze directly. Would you have accepted my help if I had offered it openly? Or would you have told me not to worry, that you had it under control? That I should focus on my own life, like you always do? David had no answer. We both knew the truth. Sophie stared at the key in her hand, the symbol of what she'd thought was generosity, now revealed as something far more complicated. So, what happens now? She asked quietly. Is this still my house? Was any of this real? No one answered. The perfect Christmas morning had unraveled completely. Years of family dynamics and hidden truths exposed in the harsh light of day. I think, I finally said, breaking the heavy silence, that we need to have an honest conversation. All of us. About money. About expectations. About how this family really works. David nodded slowly. Yes, he agreed, his voice rough. I think we do. The silence that followed felt endless. Outside, the snow continued to fall, insulating our family drama from the rest of the world. The Christmas tree lights blinked rhythmically, casting alternating shadows across 4 stunned faces. Eleanor was the first to move, pushing herself up with unusual stiffness. I need tea for this conversation, she announced, her voice tight. Strong tea. I'll help, Sophie volunteered, grateful for any excuse to escape the living room's tension. David and I were left alone, the mortgage documents between us like a physical manifestation of all that had gone unspoken. How long has the business been struggling? I asked quietly. David rubbed his face, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Seriously struggling. About 3 years. But the warning signs were there earlier. I just didn't want to see them. And you never thought to tell me. I work in finance, David. I could have helped before it got this bad. David's laugh was hollow. What father wants to admit failure to his daughter? Especially the daughter who excels at exactly the thing he's failing at, financial management. But it was Sophie's burden to bear, I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. David sighed heavily. That wasn't our finest plan. We convinced ourselves we were helping her while helping ourselves. Two birds, one stone. Before I could respond, Eleanor and Sophie returned with steaming mugs. No one reached for the cookies. All right, Eleanor said, settling back onto the sofa, a noticeable distance now between her and David. I think we all need to lay our cards on the table. David, you start. How bad is it, really? David looked around at our faces, perhaps realizing there was no more room for half-truths. The business is essentially bankrupt, he admitted. I've been keeping it alive with personal funds, but I can't do that anymore. We have about $3,000 in our checking account. No retirement savings left. And until this morning, we were facing foreclosure on this house within 90 days. And my house? The bungalow? Sophie asked. How did you pay for that? David exchanged a glance with Eleanor. It was bank-owned, a foreclosure itself. We got it for $190,000, well below market value. I took a loan against my life insurance policy for the down payment, and the mortgage payments are actually less than what we were paying on this house. So, you were planning to lose this house? I pressed. Move in with Sophie. And then what? Start over, David said simply. Downsize the business to just me. No employees. Focus on smaller jobs I could handle myself. While living with me, Sophie clarified, her voice uncharacteristically hard. It would have been temporary, Eleanor insisted. A year at most. Sophie shook her head in disbelief. And when were you planning to tell me this part of the arrangement? After I'd moved in. After I'd painted and decorated. After I'd started thinking of it as my own space. We were going to tell you today, David said. After the initial excitement wore off, we thought it would be easier if you saw it as your house first, with us as guests. Manipulative guests, I couldn't help adding. That's unfair, Chloe, Eleanor snapped. We were drowning. We did what we thought was best for everyone. By lying to everyone. The question hung in the air. Eleanor's face crumpled slightly. We didn't lie. We just didn't tell the whole truth. And what about you, Eleanor? I asked, realizing something didn't quite add up. Did you really not know about any of this? The business problems? The foreclosure? Eleanor's eyes flicked to David, then down to her tea. I knew things were tight, she admitted. I didn't know how tight. David handles the finances. He always has. Eleanor, David began. But she cut him off. But I haven't been completely honest either, she continued, her voice strengthening. I've been having health problems. I haven't told any of you. Severe migraines, dizziness. I've been to several specialists in the past year. Now it was David's turn to look shocked. What? When? How did I not know this? I scheduled appointments during your work hours. Paid the copays in cash so they wouldn't show up on the credit card statements you review. Eleanor's laugh was hollow. I guess we've all been keeping secrets. Sophie sat down her mug with enough force that tea sloshed onto the coffee table. This is insane. Our entire family is built on lies. Eleanor is hiding health issues. David is hiding financial collapse. You two are conspiring to use me as a housing solution without telling me the truth. And Chloe is secretly paying off mortgages. I was trying to help, I said defensively. By going behind everyone's back. Sophie countered. Just like they did. The accusation stung, because there was truth in it. Had I not been just as dishonest by concealing what I knew and what I had done? Why didn't you just tell me what you found? David asked again, echoing my own thoughts. I took a deep breath, searching for honesty. Because I knew you wouldn't accept my help. You never do. You and Eleanor have spent my entire life telling me how capable I am, how I don't need guidance or support, how I always land on my feet. Meanwhile, Sophie gets endless help, endless support, endless resources. If I had confronted you about the foreclosure and offered to help, you would have told me to keep my money, that you would figure it out. Is that so wrong? David challenged. Wanting my daughters to be independent. But you only want one of your daughters to be independent, I replied, the words I'd held back for years finally breaking free. The other one gets rescued constantly. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To watch your parents bend over backwards to help your sister while treating my accomplishments as expected and unremarkable. That's not fair, Eleanor protested. It's not, I countered. When was the last time you celebrated something I achieved with even half the enthusiasm you show when Sophie sells a single painting? When have you ever offered to help me with anything, assuming I didn't need it, because I'm the responsible one? We are proud of you, David insisted. Being proud isn't the same as being supportive, I said. And it certainly doesn't explain why you would buy Sophie a house while losing your own. Sophie, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. She's right. You do treat us differently. Her voice was small but clear. You've always acted like Chloe has everything figured out, like she doesn't need anything from you. Do you know how much pressure that puts on me? To be the one who always needs rescuing. Sometimes I feel like the only way I get your attention is by struggling. This was a revelation I hadn't expected. I'd always assumed Sophie enjoyed her position as the family focus, that she deliberately played up her difficulties. That can't be true, Eleanor said. But she sounded uncertain. It is, Sophie insisted. And meanwhile, I've been jealous of Chloe for years. For her stability, her confidence, the way she never seems to need validation from anyone. The truth is, I felt like a failure compared to her for most of my adult life. I stared at my sister in disbelief. You're jealous of me? When they so obviously favor you. They don't favor me, Sophie said. They worry about me. There's a difference. Worry isn't the same as respect, I concluded. The room fell silent as we all absorbed this new perspective. Was it possible we had all been misreading the family dynamic for years? David cleared his throat. I think perhaps your mother and I have made some serious mistakes, he said slowly. We thought we were responding to each of you according to your needs, but maybe we were just reinforcing harmful patterns and lying to each other in the process. All of us, Eleanor added quietly, reaching for David's hand despite her earlier anger. So what now? Sophie asked, holding up the house key. What happens with the bungalow? With this house? David looked at the mortgage papers, then at me. Chloe has saved the family home, he said simply. At significant personal cost. The least we can do is be honest about our situations going forward. It was a start, but so many unresolved questions still hung in the air. How would David rebuild his business? What was wrong with Eleanor's health? What would happen with Sophie's house? And how would our family dynamic change now that our roles, the responsible daughter, the struggling artist, the protective father, the nurturing mother, had been so thoroughly disrupted? I looked around at the three faces I'd known my entire life, wondering if I'd ever truly seen them clearly before this moment. The conversation moved from the living room to the kitchen. Eleanor insisted we needed food to continue such an emotionally draining discussion. There was something comforting in the familiar routine, her pulling leftovers from the refrigerator, David automatically setting the table. Small actions that suggested despite all that had been revealed, some fundamental connections remained intact. Sophie and I sat at opposite ends of the kitchen island, both unusually quiet. The house key sat between us, no longer a simple gift, but a complicated symbol of our family's tangled dynamics. I want to understand exactly what happened with the business, I said, as Eleanor placed reheated ham and scalloped potatoes in front of us. The complete truth, David. No more protecting us from reality. David took a deep breath, serving himself a much smaller portion than usual. It started before the pandemic, actually. The construction industry in this area was getting more competitive, with bigger companies moving into our territory. They could underbid me on larger projects because of their volume discounts on materials. He described how he tried to compete by cutting his own margins, working longer hours, reducing staff. Then the pandemic hit. Projects dried up for months, and material costs soared. I took out a business loan to stay afloat. Then a second one. I kept thinking things would turn around, but then supply chain issues meant I couldn't complete projects on time, which led to penalties and unhappy clients. Why didn't you tell me any of this during our weekly calls? I asked. David's laugh was hollow. What father wants to admit failure to his daughter? Especially the daughter who excels at exactly the thing he's failing at, financial management. I could have helped, I insisted, before it got so bad. Would you have wanted my advice if our situations were reversed? He challenged gently. The question gave me pause. Would my pride have stopped me, too? Eleanor cleared her throat. While we're being honest, I should explain about my health issues, too. She described months of debilitating migraines, increasing frequency, 3 different neurologists, a battery of tests, still no clear diagnosis. She'd been managing with prescription medications that left her foggy and fatigued. I didn't want to worry any of you, she explained. And I suppose I didn't want to acknowledge that something might be seriously wrong. Do they think it could be something serious? Sophie asked, her earlier anger softened by concern. They don't know yet, Eleanor admitted. The latest doctor wants me to see a specialist in Boston for more advanced testing. Tests that cost money we don't have, David added quietly. The pieces were falling into place. David's desperate financial maneuvers, the secrecy, even the bizarre plan involving Sophie's house. They had been drowning in problems they felt they couldn't share. My turn for honesty, Sophie said suddenly. I haven't been entirely truthful about my art career either. We all turned to look at her, surprised. That gallery opportunity one mentioned. It fell through months ago, actually. I've been working at a coffee shop for the past year just to make rent. My art hasn't sold in 18 months. But you always talk about your projects, your connections, Eleanor said, confusion evident. Sophie's smile was sad. Because that's what you expect from me. To be the creative one, pursuing her passion. I didn't want to admit that I'm nearly 32 and might have failed at the only thing I've ever wanted to do. So, you've been struggling even more than we knew, David said slowly. Sophie nodded. Which makes your plan to buy me a house and then move in with me even more absurd. I can barely support myself, let alone help you two start over. The truth hung heavy in the air. Each of us had been performing a role we thought the others needed us to play, all while hiding our real struggles and fears. And you, Chloe? Eleanor asked gently. What truths have you been keeping from us besides paying off our mortgage? I stared down at my barely touched food. I guess I've been pretending that your opinions don't matter to me, I finally admitted. Acting like I'm completely self-sufficient because that's what everyone expects. But the truth is, I've spent my entire adult life still seeking your approval, still hoping you would one day be as enthusiastic about my path as you are about Sophie's. Oh, honey, Eleanor said, reaching across the table for my hand. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty, I continued. I'm just trying to be honest. I've been jealous of the attention Sophie gets, while apparently she's been jealous of the respect I get. We've both been missing what the other had. Sophie caught my eye and gave me a small, sad smile of recognition. The irony, David said, shaking his head, is that your mother and I have spent years thinking we were doing what was best for both of you. Supporting Sophie's creativity because it seemed more fragile. Celebrating your independence because it seemed to be what you wanted. We never meant to make either of you feel less valued. Eleanor added, we love you both so much, just in different ways. Maybe that's the problem, I suggested. Loving us differently instead of simply loving us equally. We continued talking through the afternoon, unpacking years of misunderstandings and unspoken expectations. There were moments of tension, brief flares of old resentments, but also surprising instances of connection and recognition. For perhaps the first time, we were seeing each other as we truly were, flawed, vulnerable, and human, rather than the roles we had assigned each other. As the short winter day began to darken, David returned to practical matters. About the houses, he said, Chloe has saved this one, which I'm more grateful for than I can express. But we still have the bungalow, with a new mortgage we arguably cannot afford. We could sell it, Eleanor suggested. Use the proceeds to help rebuild our retirement savings. It was supposed to be Sophie's gift, David said, looking at my sister. Even if our plan was flawed, we did want you to have a place of your own. Sophie looked at the key still on the kitchen island. I think, she said slowly, that I need to stand on my own feet for real. Not with a house I didn't earn. Not with constant rescuing. She pushed the key toward David. Sell it. Use the money to rebuild. Maybe help Eleanor get the medical care she needs. Are you sure? Eleanor asked. Sophie nodded. For once, I want to solve my own problems. I considered the situation. My analyst mind automatically running numbers. The housing market in this area is strong, I said. You could likely sell the bungalow for more than you paid. That would give you some breathing room. And the business? David asked, looking at me with new respect. We can look at the books together, I offered. See if there's a path to restructuring, or if it makes more sense to wind it down and perhaps start something smaller, more specialized. I would appreciate that. David said. The words clearly difficult for him to say. As we continued discussing practical next steps, I felt something shift in the atmosphere. The walls of secrecy and pretense had crumbled, leaving us seeing each other clearly, perhaps for the first time in years. There was pain in that clarity, but also possibility. The chance to build something more authentic than what had come before. I think, Eleanor said, rising to make a fresh pot of coffee, that this might be the most honest Christmas we have ever had. None of us could disagree. 6 months after that revelatory Christmas, we gathered again around the family dining table. The season had changed from winter's stark clarity to summer's lush abundance, and the family dynamics had undergone an equally dramatic transformation. The kitchen windows were open, letting in a warm breeze that carried the scent of the garden Eleanor had planted as part of her therapy. After extensive testing, her doctors had finally diagnosed her condition as a treatable form of vestibular migraine. The medication regimen was helping, and the simple act of gardening had become both physical therapy and stress relief. David moved around the kitchen with new energy, preparing a simple but delicious meal. The construction business had been formally closed 3 months ago, a difficult but ultimately liberating decision. With my help, he had found a position as a construction manager for a commercial development firm. Less pressure, regular hours, and a steady income with benefits that covered Eleanor's medical expenses. How is the new apartment working out? I asked Sophie as we set the table. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. Small but perfect, and completely affordable on my new salary. After confronting the reality of her stalled art career, Sophie had made a bold decision. She leveraged her creative skills and coffee shop experience to land a position as a marketing coordinator for a local brewery. She still created art in her free time, but without the pressure of depending on it for income. And they actually value my artistic background, she added. I'm designing all their seasonal labels now. That's fantastic, I said. Meaning it. The competition that had characterized our relationship for so long had mellowed into something more supportive. Our parents' house, now officially saved and secure, had undergone small but meaningful changes. The living room had been repainted in a brighter color. Family photos that had been stored away for years now lined the hallway, including several of Sophie and me together as children, before competition and comparison had created distance. We settled around the table, the conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. No one was performing a role or hiding difficulties. We had learned, painfully but definitively, that secrets ultimately caused more damage than the truths they were meant to protect. I have news, I announced as we finished the main course. I've been offered a promotion at the firm. Senior financial advisor, with my own client portfolio. Chloe, that is wonderful. Eleanor exclaimed, with genuine enthusiasm. They want me to specialize in family financial planning, I continued, helping multiple generations navigate their finances together. Apparently, my personal experience gave me some insight. David laughed at that. I would say so. You saved our family from financial ruin. We saved ourselves, I corrected gently. All of us, by finally being honest. Speaking of honesty, Sophie said, setting down her fork. I've been meaning to ask you something, Chloe. Are you really okay with how everything turned out? You spent a huge amount of your savings to save this house, and now David and Eleanor are back on their feet, and I'm finding my way, but what about you? Have you been able to rebuild your own financial safety net? The question was asked with sincere concern, not the competitive edge that might have colored it in the past. I considered my answer carefully. Financially, I'm getting there, I replied honestly. The promotion helps. But what I gained in other ways has been worth far more than money. For years, I measured my worth in this family by achievements and milestones. I thought if I was successful enough, independent enough, you would all see me the way you saw Sophie. As someone worth investing in emotionally. But we did invest in you emotionally, Chloe, Eleanor protested softly. I know you did, I acknowledged. But we all got caught in patterns that made it hard to show love in ways each of us could recognize. David and I spoke the language of practical achievements. Eleanor and Sophie connected through emotional support. We were all trying to love each other, just not in ways that translated across the divide. David nodded slowly. I always thought I was showing you respect by not interfering, by trusting your judgment. I never realized it felt like distance to you. And I thought I was protecting all of you by handling problems myself, I added. But really, I was just reinforcing the walls between us. After dinner, we moved to the back porch. The evening was warm, fireflies beginning to blink in the gathering dusk. We had established a new tradition over these past months, regular family dinners where we deliberately practiced honest communication, even when it was uncomfortable. I sold the bungalow, David said as we settled into the porch chairs. Final closing was yesterday. Although we had all known this was coming, the finality still carried emotional weight. How do you feel about it? I asked Sophie. She considered the question. Relieved, actually. That house represented so many complicated things. David's secret struggles, my own insecurities, our family's tendency to solve problems with band-aids instead of honest conversation. It feels clean to have it resolved. The proceeds covered the remaining mortgage and gave us a small cushion, David explained. Nothing extravagant, but enough that your mother and I can start rebuilding our retirement savings. And we've created a family emergency fund, Eleanor added, with clear guidelines about when and how we ask each other for help. It was another new tradition, approaching family finances with transparency rather than pride or secrecy. We had drafted a simple agreement, all four of us, about how we would handle money issues going forward. Not because we didn't trust each other, but because we now understood how easily unspoken expectations could create misunderstandings. As darkness fell and we prepared to head our separate ways, David pulled me aside. "I never properly thanked you," he said quietly. "Not just for the mortgage, but for forcing us all to face reality. It wasn't done gracefully, I admit. I could have found a better way to address it all," I mused. "Maybe," he acknowledged, "but I'm not sure we would have listened to a gentler approach. Sometimes a shock is needed to break through denial." He hugged me then, a real embrace rather than the perfunctory goodbye I'd grown accustomed to. "I have always been proud of you," he said. "But now I understand you better. And that is worth even more." As I drove home that night, I reflected on the phrase that had hurt so deeply at Christmas, "You will understand someday." David had been wrong about what I would understand. It wasn't about favoring one child over another or making unequal gifts. What I came to understand was much more valuable, that families are imperfect systems built by imperfect people. That love can be present even when expressed awkwardly. And that honesty, however painful, is the only foundation solid enough to support real connection. The mortgage papers that had changed everything now sat in David's office drawer. A reminder not of financial transactions, but of emotional ones. By saving the physical house, I had inadvertently forced us to rebuild the home within it. The connections, trust, and understanding that make a family more than just people who share DNA. As I pulled into my apartment building's parking garage, my phone chimed with a group text from Sophie. A selfie of her in her small, cheerful apartment, paintbrush in hand, with the caption, "Art for joy, not for rent money." We had started checking in with each other regularly, building the sister relationship we'd never fully developed growing up. Someday had come sooner than any of us expected. And with it came the recognition that the most valuable gift that Christmas had not been a house or a paid mortgage, but the truth that finally allowed us to see each other clearly, not as roles or expectations, but as people worthy of both honesty and compassion. This Christmas fundamentally changed everything for my family, leading us down a path of healing I never imagined. If my story resonated with you, or if you've ever experienced a moment when a family secret came crashing down, forcing a reckoning, please share your thoughts. What's the most difficult family conversation you've ever had, and what came from it? Drop your stories in the comments below. I'm reading everything.